Investigations on the purported links between casinos and other social ills reveal similar results as well. Finally, what impact do casinos have on the community's population of young people? For those of us in the commercial casino industry, where the age requirements to gamble are 21 in all 13 states where we operate, preventing underage gambling is a business imperative. And from my own perspective, it was underage gambling that was a wake-up call for me 1 or 2 years after I was named president and CEO of Gaming at Harrah's. We had an incident at one of our casinos in Atlantic City, and that incident shook me because an 18-year-old girl who made herself up to look very adult by anybody's definition lost about $15,000. She was comped into her room. We gave her a bottle of champagne, and it was a situation that caught my attention as CEO of the company and started me thinking about how we can prevent this. And we began investigating this whole issue and developed a program called Project 21 to reduce the chance that that would ever happen again, that somebody who was young like that, her father was a police captain on the Atlantic City Police Force. So it's something that the entire industry has taken very seriously. Casinos have put into place strict policies to ensure that underage individuals don't gamble, and they educate their employees to be vigilant about identifying and removing underage individuals who attempt to gamble at their properties. But it's really important that we do this in the state of Ohio because all 4 of your casinos are in urban centers. Nevada didn't have this problem because for many, many years, no people under 21 lived very close to Nevada casinos. Obviously, there were the residents of Reno and Las Vegas, but most of the population of people under that age lived in California, and they were 4 or 5 hours away. But here, they're very close. So it's important that casinos work with law enforcement and with children's advocacy groups to ensure that children are not in casinos. Even though children would now find it, I think, very difficult to gamble in a casino anywhere in the United States, given all of the safeguards that have been implemented, research does show us that, in fact, people under the age of 21 are gambling, and they gamble at a higher rate than adults. A survey found that nearly 70% of Americans ages 14 to 19 reported having gambled in the past year, and they wage money at poker, at sports, the lottery, and other games. In particular, there's a risk on the internet. And these young people are vulnerable to gambling disorders more so than adults. While the prevalence of pathological gambling, as I said, among adults is 1%, studies indicate that for young adults it's anywhere from 2 to 7%. These findings suggest that it's important, both in gaming communities and in non-gaming communities, to target education and prevention programs to adolescents and teens to help them avoid risky behaviors. Parents and other influential adults in young people's lives are particularly important in this effort. Looking beyond these questions, research has also offered us a better understanding of pathological gambling, including how and why the disorder affects certain people. For example, some peer-reviewed research showed an extraordinary overlap between pathological gambling and other mental disorders. A Harvard Medical School study published in 2008 found that more than 96% of the people who have a pathological gambling disorder in their lifetime have also suffered from an additional psychiatric or substance abuse disorder. So clinicians who are trying to screen for this need to understand that in order to identify the problem early. Also, as you may have read in the news recently, research shows that gambling disorders have a genetic component. So it's also important for clinicians to understand their patients' family histories. Finally, research indicates that pathological gambling is a public health issue, and the latest studies encourage community stakeholders to adopt a broader focus on this issue. Rather than concentrating on individual gamblers, they should consider how gambling affects the population at large, as well as the social, the cultural, and the economic factors that influence disordered gambling. Recognizing the public health implications of pathological gambling is a crucial first step towards successfully integrating casinos into Ohio's communities. So how can the state's leaders go about adopting a public health approach? Here again, there is an opportunity to learn from research and the practices in other jurisdictions. In 2004, 3 leading researchers published a paper describing the research-based framework for responsible gaming in communities called the Reno Model. And they contended that because gambling problems are a public health concern, communities should join together to address the issue. The Reno Model urges community leaders to endorse the following 5 principles. First, commit to reducing the incidence and ultimately the prevalence of gambling-related harms. Second, work collaboratively to inform and evaluate public policy aimed at reducing the incidence of gambling-related harms. Third, identify both the short and the long-term priorities and establish an action plan to address these priorities within a recognized time frame. Fourth, use scientific research to guide the development of public opinions and policies. In addition, the gaming industry will use this scientific research as a guide for the development of their industry-based strategic policies to reduce both the incidence and the prevalence of gambling-related harms. And lastly, once established, the action plan to reduce the incidence and the prevalence of gambling-related harms has to be monitored and evaluated. Communities that have adopted a collaborative approach to developing gambling policies have seen some promising results. And I'll mention these because I think it's important for Ohio to look to some of the experiences. One is Missouri Alliance to Curb Problem Gambling. That's a partnership between their Problem Gambling Council, their State Department of Mental Health and Alcohol and Drug Abuse, and the Missouri Gaming Association and the Missouri Gaming Commission. Same thing has happened in Nevada, where under the Nevada's Advisory Committee on Problem Gambling, they brought together experts from a number of fields to guide the distribution of the state's Problem Gambling Revolving Fund, which supports research, education, and prevention and treatment. When creating policies and programs to minimize gambling-related harms, Ohio's leaders have to work together. They have to assemble a broad coalition of stakeholders in order to be successful. And in addition, they must rely on peer-reviewed research rather than on conventional wisdom as they move toward their goals. We're confident that the NCRG can serve as a resource on that front, offering access to the best available research on the nature and on the prevalence of gambling disorders. In addition, the NCRG can connect Ohio's policymakers, their gaming establishments, researchers, and treatment providers with effective research-based tools. Some of those are in the materials we handed out to you. One, called Your First Step to Change, is a self-guided self-help toolkit to help people who deal with this problem, because a lot of people who have this problem don't want to go to a clinician, don't want to tell their family about the problem. Another one that we've developed is called Emerge, which is a program for executives, management, and employees, teaching them how to handle responsible gaming problems and how to educate their employees and their patrons about the issues that are connected with gambling and problem gambling. In addition, I would say that Ohio is home, obviously, to a wide variety of higher education institutions. And I think this is something that can be tackled in this state faster than some of the other states have. 100% of the colleges and universities across this country have alcohol programs for their undergraduates. And they try to develop an alcohol policy so that consumption of alcohol on those campuses is responsible and doesn't do the kind of harm that it can do. But you may not realize that only 22% of the higher education institutions in this country have policies on gambling.